Okay, so slight change of topic. Wardley mapping, secret weapon for strategic thinking. So a little bit of a different topic, but equally interesting, I feel, as well. So my name is Matt Tester. The little caveat, I'm not actually a tester. I missed the boat when I was choosing a career, and I went development first and then moved on to other things. I never actually was a tester. I was just born one. But I'm also at Mantle Group, working in the same division as JB, as a principal consultant. Okay, so Wardley mapping. Let's see if this kind of situation rings a bell. You've got a great idea. You want to introduce some new tech. You start trying to explain it, but you end up getting into the what, even the what and the how, but then you fail to actually try and enunciate why you want to do this. And you end up with getting these blank stares coming back like, why? I don't see, I don't understand. Particularly if you're talking with people who are not necessarily the most technical, or certainly not in that space, the same space that you are, down at the guts of it, where it might be. And that disconnect can be frustrating, not just for you, but also potentially for other people you're trying to work with and get this initiative off the ground. So what do? You break out an architecture diagram. You start speaking to this architecture diagram, except it looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics. It doesn't make sense. When you're thinking about the strategic aspect of things, it's not so much the what as actually the where. If you were to look at a system or a set of your business, potentially, it's understanding where you need to make the change, where can we actually do that investment, the what and the how will start to fall out of that. So hopefully there's a better way of doing this. But if we take out and say, okay, A, B, or C, where should we attack this? Where should we make that change? From an architecture diagram, you can't tell alone. So by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to solve this. You'll either understand Egyptian hieroglyphics or understand that there's a better way of doing it. And what I'm presenting is Wardley Maps. So Wardley Maps were created by Simon Wardley, who freely admits that naming things is hard. And I guess if you invent something, you get to name it after yourself. But it is a visual tool to be able to understand not just your business processes, but also your technical landscape. It can be mapped to many different things. And it's a visual tool for being able to do that. So Simon worked with Canonical and on the Ubuntu space. So we've all heard of Ubuntu. And he credits the success of Ubuntu down to Wardley mapping. That's where the success and how it came about. Because we're talking about strategy, things often evolve down to Sun Tzu. Anyone read The Art of War? Few people. It's not a bad book. It's actually fairly readable when with some of the translations. The Gutenberg one is not too bad if you want to have a look at it. It's based on principles and patterns, and it follows this similar kind of grouping that Wardley Maps has kind of introduced as well. So you've got the purpose. You've got to understand why you're actually doing something. Define the realms of the game that you're playing. You've got to understand the landscape. Of course, in Sun Tzu, that's talking about where the forests are, where the hills are. With what we're talking about, it's what are our capabilities? What are the technologies we're using? How are we working? Climate. Climate are things that are always going to happen no matter what you're doing. And they're going to affect our landscape. And we'll see all of these in a bit more detail. Doctrine is about the ways of working. How do we organize ourselves to move? And then leadership. How do we actually make and understand to make decisions and then do something? Make that strategic move. The easier way we're going to look at it as we go through is with overlaying the OODA loop. So observe, orientate, decide, which is a slightly more friendly way of talking about it. Like, for example, I don't particularly like the doctrine word. It felt a bit archaic, but OODA makes a bit more sense. So we're going to understand what the game is that we're going to play. Observe, understand what we're doing. That's where we're going to be creating a map. That's where we're going to get the visual side of it. And then we're going to use orientate and decide. We're going to play with that map to understand what we do next. So because I wanted to use GPT a little bit more, apart from creating Egyptian hieroglyphics, I created a company for our demo called Scribo. Now, Scribo, they want to be able to facilitate the researchers be able to write their research papers, cite other research papers, find sources, things like that. That's what they want to be able to do. Everything's AI at the moment, and they're trying to understand how they might need to leverage AI. How do they need to evolve? What kind of initiatives do they need to initiate? So we start off by defining the game. So with what we're going to need to do with Scribo is understand exactly what they want to do. Anyone seen Simon Sinek's talk, Start With Why? Yes, TED Talk. Basically, this is the why. Why are you doing this? Understand why, what you're trying to do for your users. Just really understand the game that you're trying to play. Won't focus too much on that, but we have a purpose. And now we can actually get onto the fun part, which is actually understanding and observing where we are right now and understand what climatic effects are going to affect us. So in terms of a Wardley map, we have a coordinate system. It looks like a graph. It's actually a coordinate system. Got the y-axis with value chain and the x-axis with evolution. I'll describe those in a bit more information in more detail in a second. The first thing we're going to do on a map is be able to put our anchor points. It focuses on the users. So in terms of Scribo, we've got authors and we've got readers. Next thing we're going to do is map their needs. So what do they need to be able to do within our system? Keeping it simple. For this map, we're just going to understand that authors want to be able to create the content, readers are going to find it and also read that content as well. So we've mapped some needs. And we keep following that same path going down. So now we've got the needs for our users. We're going to map on what do we need to do to be able to satisfy that need. So we're adding components on there. Now these could be literal components that you've deployed. It could be software, it could be entire systems, activities, data, knowledge, anything that you want to be able to map and understand how you make a strategic play on it. So to be able to create content, you've got to be able to find the content. Readers obviously have to be able to find it. Create content, you need a document editor. To read it, you need a document reader. What we've got at the top there is the problem space. So we're not too worried about the coordinate system on the value chain or the evolution at this point. This is our root of the map. We've got our users and we've got their needs. The second part is the solution space, and this is where we are really interested in what that coordinate system looks like. So contemplating the x-axis at the moment on the evolution, you've got Genesis on the far left, all the way up to commodity on the far right. You can name that however you like, but it's basically a sliding scale. You've got unknown on one side, known on the other. You've got novel and new on one side, well-defined on the other side. So when we're putting in our capabilities of, say, the search index, it's a relative coordinate system going across to say it looks like search index is a lot more bespoke than the document editor. The document reader itself is a commodity. It's probably a third-party plugin that we bought. We don't have to touch. That's how we're measuring. So here we're starting to play with that evolution cycle. The linkages between things are the value chain. So each link within that chain is, you can consider it a flow of information, potentially risk, potentially finance as well, financial impact. And this is where that Y hierarchy, the Y axis is coming into play here as well. So from here, you can see for whatever reason, search index is higher up the visibility scale. So it's more visible to the users than the document editor, which is for whatever reason, slightly lower down that value chain. If we were to carry on and plot down the needs of those needs, we might end up with getting down to compute and power. You wouldn't expect power to be in the Genesis space. You've built your own power plant. What are you doing? You should be doing something different. You should be using that in the commodity side of things. So we're now getting onto the climactic side of things. So we've done our mapping. We've basically had this discussion and we've laid out our points. We've had a discussion about, okay, how visible is this to the user? How evolved is this? What are the characteristics of this capability right now? Well, one of the key climactic patterns that Wardley identifies, he identifies about 28. So within the documentation, we can have a look and see what patterns might be at play. And one of those key ones is that everything evolves through supply and demand competition. So everything is trying to move from the left-hand side, from Genesis through to evolution. So in our map, we would start to say, okay, look, the document editor, everything is becoming AI enabled these days. If it's not AI enabled, what are you doing? We're seeing that that's a trend. So we're mapping that on our map. So we highlight in red that it's future evolution. So we're saying the document editor is going to move towards being an AI-enabled editor. When that actually happens, the value chain will, in the future, move. It will shift. But we don't normally need to represent that, so we'll just kind of leave that off our diagram. But we have a component that we're saying is going to evolve. That's a climatic condition. Now, we can also say the same for the searching side of things. Going beyond just the full text search, we're actually going to do a bit more semantic searching, AI-enabled search. So that's also an evolution. Now, in our discussions with Scribo, we've actually identified that what's happened right now is that it's a custom search index. The CTO created it out of an Excel spreadsheet. I don't know, something crazy. It's really custom built. It's all the way down there on that scale. So when we are trying to say that the AI search is going to evolve and progress, it's going to cross the boundary. It's going to move. We need to move it into the product side of things. So we'd actually say there's something called inertia. So this is another set of climatic principles, actually climatic patterns, that success breeds inertia. If you've had success, then there's a reluctance to be able to change things. And inertia increases the more successful the past model is. It becomes a pet that you don't want to change. So when we're highlighting on a strategic level, hey, we actually want to be able to look at how the search index needs to move over towards an AI search. We need to flag and highlight there's going to be some challenges here. There's inertia. It could be deeply embedded in how the search index might be deeply embedded in other code. Like we've evaluated it for that reason. And so we're saying that there is inertia as it comes through. And Simon actually goes on to with another climatic principle that inertia can actually kill an organization. In his presentation, which I'll show you a link to later, he actually says that Kodak didn't die because of lack of innovation. It died because of inertia. They didn't want to change what they did because they had so much success in the past. So it's something to be aware of, and that's why it's called out on the map. So we've created a landscape and we applied some of the climatic principles. There's a lot more. Like I said, there's 28 odd that you can go through, but you're starting that conversation. So then we can start to move on to how we might follow the doctrine, how we might structure ourselves to be successful for the future as we make these choices. Again, Wardley's identified about 40 odd different doctrine principles. You can go through and see how well you evolve, how well you evaluate against them. It's tiered it up into a series of 4 different things. But one of the key ones, a lot of them are quite obvious, is use standards. So if I add authentication on here, you've got to create content, you've got to authenticate. What stands out to anybody there? It's a long way over on the left-hand side there, right? It looks like we've custom built some authentication mechanism. We're certainly doing more than what we're meant to be doing. Scribo is not in the authentication business. It shouldn't be all about that way down there. So if we're using standards, we should see something over there on the productized side of things. But use standards, it's kind of obvious. And that's where the doctrine actually helps, being the fact that it lays out these 40 odd different doctrines. We can start to see how that might play out on the map. Another really interesting one. So I've just abstracted the map slightly here a little bit. Depending on where a capability or whatever you put as a component is on the graph, where it is on the evolution scale, the nature of that system is different. And so it can actually play into how you structure your teams. So Mr. Wardley introduces the idea of pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And when he describes it, it makes sense, right? So the principle that he's trying to apply is that use an appropriate method. When you're all the way down in the custom built and the Genesis side of things, you want people who are good at being a pioneer, but are actually going to use an appropriate method. They'll be using possibly Agile. They're going to be in a undetermined space. They're going to use Agile processes. That makes more sense. If you go all the way to the other side of it, when you've got something that's a commodity, maybe you're using IPAM or networking, and you want to be able to use something like IPAM, you're trying to reduce waste. There's nothing really to try and develop and build and customize. You're trying to reduce waste, and so you're going to use something more like Six Sigma. The skills that you need each team to have. So these brackets here are how you might compose your team. You might have a team that is working in the pioneering stage. They're doing the development of a product for a client. Then when you actually have gone, great, we've delivered it to the client, we've got V1, cool, send it to the settlers. They're going to maintain that product, build the new features. different kind of process. For Scribo, that makes sense for what we're trying to deal with. But it's a nice way. I think this was the biggest thing for me around Wardley Maps on actually, this was really interesting on how you actually might play a few different things and follow doctrine in a different way. So once you've laid out and thought about your doctrine side of things, then you can actually start to make some decisions. There's lots of different strategic plays that are identified within the book or within the process. Some of them are very much chess oriented in some ways. There's one called Fool's Mate, but there's these different ways you can play the game. And I'm not going to go into too much about that, but we'll play out just a scenario to be able to know and understand how we might act. So we've condensed the diagram slightly. We know where things are likely to evolve, and we need to go and meet that demand. So we're going to plan out. So we want to create an AI-enabled editor. Well, to do that, we're going to need an LLM model. So we'll map that. We positioned it in the product space. It's less visible to the user or to the immediate need. To run that LLM model, we're going to need some compute. In fact, we probably need more than one compute. So we're probably going to need that. Compute is going to then need a load balancer as well. When you map it out this way, it seems odd, right? Because the traffic is going to go through the load balancer to get to the compute and then run in the LLM, but we've kind of got it in the reverse order. So the main thing to remember is we're mapping the needs out. And so we can play this out and say, that's great, but our value chain is now very long, all the way from author, create content down to document editor. Now it's enabled, AI-enabled editor. That chain is a long chain. So there's potential risk, there's information that needs to be understood. It's a lot to be able to take in. So we might make the strategic decision to be able to say, look, we're going to use an AI platform, maybe Azure AI Foundry. Our needs at the moment, we just need an LLM. We actually don't need to worry about the compute. We'll use the serverless version of Azure Foundry. We'll just deploy the model, away we go. So we can actually map that out. And we can actually show that we're actually going to be able to use that for AI search as well. We're going to that component is now going to have a need that's satisfied by the Azure AI Foundry. There's also another climatic pattern that higher order systems create new sources of value. So the more that something is evolved, the easier it is and more likely it is that other higher order innovations can happen. Which makes sense, right? If you've got a power plant, if you've got power easy and accessible or Wi-Fi really accessible, you can actually start to do a lot more with it. So the more available something is, the easier it is, the more componentized it is, the more you've got opportunity to create higher innovations. So for Scribo, we're going to highlight that on the map. We're going to say, look, we know we've got a new AI platform, and we're going to want to expose the fact that we're going to be able to do some new things. We don't know what they are yet, but that's what we've got. So if we were trying to sell an idea that, hey, Scribo, we need to start using AI a lot more, we want to use Azure Foundry, we've actually created a map that we can actually have a clear conversation with. We've anchored it exactly onto users' needs. We know exactly where we're going to make the changes and where we expect to make those changes. And we can now tell the story. Like we can communicate this at no matter what level. It's done in business terms as well as technical terms at the right level. So we can actually tell the story, and we'll have a lot more success as we go through. Of course, devil's in the detail. It's actually, obviously, in some ways, bias. You're creating this map, you're in a small group, it's easy to get consensus too early, potentially, on how you do things. But the more you tell that story, the easier it's going to be. But yeah, be aware that there will be bias in how you develop that map, but it's about the story and the communication that you can get from that. My other tip would be don't get too detailed. Really do start small and iterate. And for me personally, I ended up trying to morph it into an architecture diagram more than once. So this is why I wanted to highlight that example there of going from LLM to compute to load balancer. It's way too easy to start thinking in technical terms. Just think about your capabilities and what they need, and then what does that need, and just keep following that workflow through. It's almost like 5 whys. Why does this need to happen? How does this need to happen? Keep going through that loop. So if we go back to our Egyptian hieroglyphics and we need to know where we should be making a change, A, B, or C, and we'll get an idea is what we do. We're going to map it. So if we've mapped it and we end up seeing these components A, B, and C in these positions, anyone want to venture an opinion on where we should be focusing our efforts? Where should we be investing?
B looks a bit concerning.
B looks concerning? Cool. Any particular reason? How would you do it?
Take more quite to get it to market. So on the commodity side.
Yep. Yep. I mean, personally, I would have said B. You could probably make an argument for all of them. In some ways, you're making an argument based on an informed decision. So I would have said B. It's actually not that visible to the user. It's something that is looking very bespoke in the Genesis phase. Is there a way that that could be shifted immediately to commodity? Could we swap that out with something else? At least we're having the right kind of conversation. It's not just because I saw a TED talk, I want to go and do X, or I've seen the latest YouTube video and I want to go and use that technology. We're actually having the right kind of conversation as we go through. I can put these links on the main channel, but if you want to learn more, the CCOM Global Introduction to Wardley Maps is by Simon Wardley himself. Very approachable presentation. He's a good speaker. He's English. It's entertaining. Learn Wardley Mapping is a good resource as well. There's also a course on there, but it does a good job of succinctly describing how this would work. And it can work for technology as well as business process. You can do it for markets. You can do it for most things. And on there is also links to the original book. So the book from Simon Wardley is basically a collection of all of his blog posts. It's all open source. It's fairly consumable. You can derive from it as much as you like. And that's what Learn Wardley Mapping has done. I think it's 600 odd pages. It's not necessarily an easy read because it's a collection of blog posts. It's kind of a little bit disjointed, but that's the space that's evolving in at the moment. There's also another good approach called Architecture for Flow by Suzanne Kaiser. She doesn't have the same issue of naming things. It's actually quite a good name. With Lean Architecture for Flow it's taking Wardley mapping. It's also taking domain-driven design and also I forget the name of the practice, but it's about how you actually group teams around that as well. And it lays it out as a canvas on how you actually have that discussion, how you have those workshops. So it pulls in Wardley Maps and pulls in another couple of things as well. It's actually really quite good. So that's a link to a blog post and there's a YouTube video there as well. Now, if you're creating the maps, I was drawn, of course, to using something in code that I can commit and use it like everything else. So there is a Visual Studio Code plugin. There's a website associated to it as well, but it also works in Visual Studio. It's all written by a DSL, so you can commit it into code and then it will render as well. If you can make out the rendering, it's the classic example you'll see anywhere when you look at Wardley mapping, which is how to make a cup of tea. Not the most exciting example, but equally approachable. And like I said, Simon was English, so tea is close to the heart. But given that, my feedback on using the tool there is it kind of gets in the way. You start worrying about the coordinate system a wee bit too much. It's meant to be all a relative system. It can get in the way, but it's also good. It is good for being able to create some nice looking diagrams. But I would say just keep it simple. Use Excalibur, use Miro, use PowerPoint like I did, or just use pen and paper. It's an approachable technique. It's about how you apply all of those processes, not just the map itself. So given that, I'd say just give it a go. It's simple. It's a craft. The more you do it, the easier it's going to get. But in terms of that, there's some key takeaways there on how things are evolving and understanding how things work. So I'd say give it a go. See how it goes. Any questions? Thank you.
Would go back to your diagram there, was the CBA.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if the three cases at the top, the things that we supply to our customers, and say with Cursor or some kind of code editor provides some calculators and things. A being the commodity that is the third-party inference that we're getting off someone like OpenAI or Anthropic. If that's where the majority of our revenue comes from, then A is actually a risk because they might come along and eat our lunch. Right?
Absolutely.
Very visible. It's a major part of one of our workflows. It's a very short chain, which means we're not putting much in there except rehashing it.
A very astute point, and Blake, if anyone was going to spot that, it would be you. So yes, well done. So yeah, A is very visible. It's all the way on the right-hand side. It's commodity. for your business, your secret source should be more towards the custom built and the Genesis side, and it should be on the upper left side of things. It should be visible and it should be your secret source. Just so happens in this diagram that's there. So yeah, that could be a place to attack. And that's exactly what I'm saying. I could say B because it's a long way down and it seems to be that we've custom generated something that is quite low level. Should we really be doing that? Are we using standards? Like we start to question it. You can make similar arguments to like you just had there for A. It's very visible. It looks like a commodity. Is that part of our secret source or not? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. If it's just because if we plotted it there because it's a PDF reader that works in the browser, fine. We've mapped it that way. That's fine. It's not part of our secret source.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually. To map some data that and it was being sold through the zero marketplace, which made it very visible and it made it move very fast, but it was a high risk because they could replace it in marketplace with a feature in a zero.
Yeah,
which they did. Yeah. So that risk was eventuated.
Yeah. So the fundamental point of this is that it is a visual strategic tool, and how you apply it. We've shown the evolution. You could actually just map it like this, but you've got something you can point to and poke at and then call out and say, this is a risk, and you can describe it, but it's visible. And you could argue about where it lives on the map, but if everyone starts to agree on that and coalesce around that, then you've got the right kind of conversation.
You don't even need words. You can see that.
I know, exactly. Yes. So you're starting to have the right conversation. You're not worried about those technical details. You're talking in the same way, and you can have a conversation with a wider group of people. It's not just the technology, it's the business. Everyone can start to have a stake in understanding how that might be, potentially. Depends on the conversation, on the situation. Yep.
Yeah, Matt, who's using this? What industries and what countries?
So if you look on AWS, Simon's done a series of talks. They're trying to use it more in government space at the moment. So the AWS series of videos. UK, US. We'd have to have a Google on that one. Maybe we'll do an AI search on that one. But it is primarily focused on those kind of areas at the moment. So when you look at that CCOM talk, Simon talks about something, I think it was British, somewhere around the British Rail Network, where they mapped it out. But you can map so many different types of things. You could map your marketing profile for yourself, like your personal marketing profile, and like, where do I see things happening and I need to be able to do this. You can map anything you want. It's that thought process that's the important part.
Wondering if something like Japan had an equivalent process that we're not aware of, but are very good at manufacturing things efficiently.
Yes.
And finding out bugs in this process chains.
Yeah, that's the act of doing it. Yeah, so in terms of Wardley mapping, that would be more around the doctrine side of things, whereas this is that strategic thinking, where are we planning to move, not what necessarily. Yeah. I recommend seeing the CCOM talk. It's good. It's very good. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And if you can take one piece of this, like Suzanne did, take the portion of Wardley Maps that she likes and apply better principles for what she's working with the domain-driven design to create those bounded contexts. So I created my pioneer settlers and town planners to fit my map, but Suzanne goes around the process of actually create your bounded context is how you might do behavior-driven design and start to meld it that way and then apply team principles on top. So really digs into that doctrine side of things and emphasizes that. But ultimately things come around back to Sun Tzu and those patterns and that process that you loop through. It just makes it so interesting. Yes.
So I could see the value in it and how it sparks that conversation. But I guess let's say you want to introduce this to your team or your business or whatever, you have to take them through what is Wardley Maps and how does it work for them to so that they're on the same page, right?
If you're going through the workshop aspects and having them build this map with you, yes. And that's where the lean architecture for flow approach works a little bit better because there is a canvas. On Learn Wardley Map, I'll bring those slides back up. So on Learn Wardley Mapping, they also have a Miro canvas that actually helps takes you through that process as well and builds it out, so it can have facilitated.
It's like a wizard of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a 30-minute presentation. You've got the nuts and bolts of it. There's a little bit of nuance in some of the notation you can use in the diagrams, but the gist is there. It shouldn't take too much. I think you could possibly present it in a document and show this is the thing. This is our map of the world, and then have words describing it and going underneath, and you'd be sweet. I think you'd be fine. Awesome. Thank you very much.